Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to a brand new Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Willett, coming to you live from the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains on this October 19th, 2021. Tonight, we have a fantastic show for you. We are joined by new guest and old friend, Erica Lukes, to talk about UFO Disclosure and her work as a professional in this field. We have some great information to share with you tonight, some fantastic discussion, as well as taking your questions. Don't go away. Everyone, I hope everyone out there is ready for tonight's fantastic Vestiges After Dark. I think you're going to find the subject matter pretty revealing and pretty interesting. I mean, certainly anytime we talk about UFOs, which is not very often, since this is not really a subject that we get into too often. Typically, we're talking about ghosts or demons or something like that. But tonight, we're getting back into the UFOs and the aliens and, you know, what the hell's going on out there in the sky. I mean, I don't know. But our guest tonight can probably tell us a lot about what is really going on behind the scenes. And that's what I'm really looking forward to sharing with you tonight. But first, before we get into that, I'd like to take questions from the ether to get us started off with, everything on the right. We want to be on the right foot for this. You know what I mean? So tonight, we have two questions that came in that I think I need to address. So I'll be pretty brief because I don't want to spend too much time on this. I really want to get into tonight's subject matter. But the first question that came in was, did I delete or did I block you on Twitter, or where did I go? Did I delete my Twitter account? We're getting all sorts of questions about what happened to the @ExorcistBishop page on Twitter. No, I did not block you. I did not delete the account. Twitter deleted the account. And they didn't explain why. I can't explain to you why because I was not told why the account was deleted. But there are a plethora of reasons why that might have happened. And honestly, it was perhaps the best thing that could have ever happened because I've been wanting off that platform for more than a couple years. And the only reason why I stayed as long as I did was because so many of you were there. I mean, I think I had like something like almost 20,000 followers on Twitter. And I tried very hard to get a lot of you to come over to the Nicolean Network where we didn't have to deal with all of the big tech and all of the controversies that tend to permeate through the mainstream social media. I'm not a very political person, although sometimes my job requires me to discuss politics just on the basis of, where we stand in terms of ethics and morality and, the basics of being a pastor. Sometimes the subject comes up. But, when you go to Twitter today, it's basically just political tribalism. And I've been wanting off that platform for a long time. I'm tired of it. You know me. I am a very middle of the road, neutral person. I'm definitely not what you would consider to be a conservative. I'm certainly not a liberal. I just basically want to be left alone. That's the kind of how I look at it. Politically, I just want to be left alone. I want the government out of my life. So I guess that means it makes me a libertarian. But overall, I just believe in personal responsibility, and that's it. But you go to Twitter, it's always just tribalism. So I've been wanting off that platform. This gave me an excuse because now I could fight it. They gave me an appeal process that I could go through to try to get the account back. I don't want the account back. Okay, so it's gone. And I'm not going back to Twitter. I'm never going back to Twitter. I'm not even creating a new account or nothing. No. So that's where I am. But where you can find me is on the Nicolean network. Okay. So the best way to be able to ask me all the questions that you used to ask me on Twitter, just go to nicolean.mn.co. That's nicholean.mn. That's Mike November.co. Charlie Oscar. Okay. And that's all you have to do. Go over there and sign up. It's free. We don't charge you. The church pays for that. We have sponsors that pay for it. And it's free to use as you see fit. So that's all you have to do to find me. I'm also on Instagram. I had an Instagram account for a long time. I just never used it. I'm getting back into Instagram now because a lot of my fans from Twitter were already following me on Instagram. And we started that up because I was getting ready to maybe do a television show at the time, the Paranormal Paramedics. And I thought, well, everyone says, when you're doing television, Instagram's the way to go. And I kind of agree with that, but I never used it. It's the account's there, it's active, and now I'm using it again. Okay, so if you're not willing to come over to our private social media network, where you don't have to be a church member, you don't have to be a benefactor. I don't even care. It doesn't matter. It's free to you. Use it as a social media platform, and we're not going to censor your speech at all. You have opinions. We have opinions. Everyone has opinions, and we respect all opinions there. So you can get as opinionated as you want. No one's going to stop you. Just be respectful. Don't harass people. Don't stalk people. Don't, the basic things, that is not acceptable in any civilized society. I mean, we're very, 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 liberty forward there. Okay. But if you don't want to come over, find me on Instagram. I'm still on Facebook. The public page for Exorcist Bishop is there too. So no, I did not block you. I did not delete the account. Twitter did. Okay. Now, hopefully that answers that question. Second question that came up, and I'll do this very quickly, was from Teresa on the Nicolean network. And she said, she asked, I know someone who is an atheist that is having paranormal problems. How do you normally handle situations like that? And it's a good question, and I thought it deserved a more complete answer, so I said I'll answer it on today's episode of Vestiges during the questions from the Ether segment. And this is what you do. You handle it just like you would any other case, okay? Clearly, they're coming to you, and if they're coming to you and wanting help, then clearly they're at least acknowledging that the paranormal or something paranormal is happening, that something that they don't understand exists. It doesn't really necessarily matter if they believe in God per se. What matters is they at least can acknowledge that something strange that is working outside of the normal framework of how they think reality works is happening in their lives. And that is really the only thing you need to be able to help someone. So if it gets to the point of possession, then atheism's not so much of an obstacle anymore, because once a person, in my experience, experiences demonic oppression or demonic possession, their atheism starts to wane after that. There seems to be something magical that happens when someone meets a demon who didn't believe in God or devils before that. It seems like if you meet a demon, then all of a sudden you're like, well, now you start questioning your whole worldview. Well, maybe God does exist. And I've had a lot of people that have said that they were atheists, and then they saw me on Ghost Adventures, or they saw me on television talking about they saw something. And after some time, they realized that maybe they were wrong, and they started exploring their spirituality and coming to the realization that there is something out there that's much greater than us. And, we call it God. You might call it something else. That's not really relevant. What is relevant is that there is help. And one of the best things that you can do with someone who's an atheist is help them, because then they can see that there's unconditional support out there. And like I said, I have never been the kind of bishop that required you to believe in anything. All right. All I want to do is be able to give you the means to living a healthier, happier, more functional life. That's it. And if you're coming to me for help, I'm going to help you regardless of your worldview. That's why we help Muslims. That's why we help Wiccans, and we help people that are non-Christians. If they come to us, we help them as best that we can. Now, there's certain limitations, obviously. If a person's not baptized, then there's certain rites of the church that I can't use because the baptism would have to come first as a prerequisite. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can't help them. Most paranormal problems do not require the real complicated rites of the church. So, if a person's an atheist, well, we help them. And, I can tell you right now, we've had a lot of atheists come to us and we've helped them. And it's really rattled their worldview. They question their atheism now. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. It's definitely not a bad thing. I think it's really important that we have our worldviews shaken up a bit. Even those of us who are very confident in our Christianity, I think it's important to have our worldview shaken up a bit because, things are never exactly the way you think they are. And your beliefs are largely projections of what goes on in here, your imagination. What authentically is usually very different than what we believe to be true. And sometimes we can take our beliefs for granted because we're so conditioned by them. We're so used to talking about them. And that applies to atheists as well as, religious people. Doesn't really matter. Okay. And, when you really break it down, I don't think I've met too many true, genuine atheists. I think most people that call themselves atheists are actually agnostics. They just don't really know what's going on out there, but they know something's going on. And I know a lot of people that call themselves atheists that do believe in angels and demons. They do believe in spiritual beings. They just don't believe that God's controlling anything. And that has a lot more to do, I think, with their philosophical conflicts. Usually the problem of evil. They're like, if God's omnipotent, if he's omniscient, if he's omnipresent, if he's all loving, then, why do we have, children being raped and murdered? Why do we have, all these nasty things that happen in the world? Why isn't he intervening and stopping that? Well, it's kind of a thing that you have to understand that God puts liberty higher than holiness. And that means that there's consequences to that. But, we're not going to get into that tonight. We're going to get into UFOs tonight. And I'm really excited about tonight's show. So hopefully that answers your questions. And if it doesn't, then you can ask them during the discussion part of the show a little bit later on. Because, we always get into that. But we have a Sister Mary Joan here with us tonight. How are you doing, Sister?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's ready. Talking about shaking it up a little bit. I think we're going to do that tonight. Talking about UFOs, UAPs, maybe some cryptids, a little dash of interdimensional beings. I mean, hey, why not? We got the perfect person for it.
We do. And, this is a person that we have been in contact with. I've been on her show. We've talked, we've known each other for years, and she's never been on this show. And that's part of it because when we were talking more and I was on her show, we weren't really doing Vestiges weekly like we do now and more regularly. So as soon as we got it to the point that we're back and we're taking guests and, doing this like a traditional show, I said, we need to get Erica on because there's nobody I know that knows more about this subject than she does. So you are all very blessed. Let me tell you. All of you, this entire audience, you really don't know just how wonderful this is that she has agreed so kindly to be on the show tonight because she is a fantastic person and a wonderful professional and just knows so much about what's really going on out there. Our guest tonight is Erica Lukes. She was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, and also has an undying passion for the mysteries of the universe, particularly UFO reports and other strange aerial phenomena. Since childhood, she has been fascinated with imagery of how vehicles and beings from space might appear, and she pursued this interest quietly but with determination. UFO reports became her specialty, and she joined the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, in 2014 as a field investigator. She eventually became its state director for Utah. Within MUFON, she also became an associate producer for the MUFON communications team and a part of the MUFON experiencer research team, having been cited for recognition of this work at both the 2014 and 2015 MUFON symposia. With her proximity in the state of Utah, Erica has had a persistent interest also in the Skinwalker Ranch, a location of regularly reported paranormal activity. She has assembled several decades worth of case reports of mass UFO sightings, alien abduction reports, and animal mutilations from her years of field research in and around the ranch. She also appears on television shows. She's been on, most notably, UFOs, The Lost Evidence on the Travel Channel, NASA's Unexplained Files on the Science Channel, Ancient Aliens on the History Channel, and Strange Evidence on the Science Channel. So tonight we welcome Erica Lukes to Vestiges After Dark. How are you tonight, Erica?
I'm just happy to be here with both of you.
Can
I just say that
thank you for coming on.
I think the world of both of you, and it's just really a nice highlight, especially for October, my favorite month of the year.
It is. It really worked out very well. We kept a date in October open because we wanted somebody special to come on, being that, the paranormal becomes a little bit more popular during this time of year, and October's sort of that special month. So we kept a date open, and we weren't really sure how we were going to fill that. And then when Sister Mary Joan said that you could be available, I said, well, that needs to be the date. So I'm so happy.
Excited. Yeah. Thank you. I'm really
thank
excited.
you. Come on.
I just have to say, I've got to just what have I got here? This is
the blessing kit. Yes, you have one of the original ones.
Yes, right there. That's like series 1 blessing kit.
Yep.
That was the ultra deluxe kit.
Right.
Well, this was very cool, and it has a special place in my UFO library and in my heart. So I appreciate it.
I hope it has helped. Has it helped you? If I don't know. I mean, do you ever come home with strange things with all of your adventures?
You know what? And then some. It's like it's been really. Assaulting has been a trip.
Yeah.
And I think with Skinwalker Ranch and places like that, it definitely there's a lot going on there, and it's like hard to decide. Where does the paranormal begin? Where is how much of this is man-made? It's really been a trip. Yeah. But there are definitely some people with very dark energies involved in all of this. I've learned that one. So,
well, I mean, I think that's true in the entire paranormal field, regardless of what the focus is, whether it be on the UFOs or on the ghosts and demons, and I think sometimes people tend to separate those two things in their head. And certainly I am not of the religious persuasion that would say that that aliens are demons. I mean, there are ministers that believe that. I am not one of them. I do think they are two very separate things. But I'm not convinced that aliens are necessarily from other planets. I sometimes wonder if there's not something interdimensional going on, or perhaps they're quite terrestrial. Yeah, and I don't know, and that's kind of why we'll want you on tonight, because you're the best person to run by these kinds of thoughts and theories, and certainly you've probably heard it all, so I'm sure you can add a tremendous amount of insight into some of these things.
Well, hopefully. And I think you really hit on a good point that, none of us know, we can't say that this is extraterrestrial. We can't say that, we try to delineate things, and that just doesn't work. We can't be that arrogant to try to put things in boxes, I think.
Same in the paranormal field. I mean, we have a bunch of theories and experiences, but do we know for sure about a lot of these things? Not so much. Right. It's a lot of experience with theory, and that's what makes it such a addictive.
We have, I think, Sister, a little bit of I mean, we have a little bit of an advantage, I think, over UFO investigators, and that's that we have an ancient history of very, very well established theology and methodology for dealing with things like demons and ghosts. This is not news to the people of the planet Earth. You would have gone back 3,000 years ago. If you could get into a time machine and go back 3,000 or 4,000 years and talk about ghosts and demons, they would know what you're talking about. It wouldn't be something that's strange. Telling them that there's people coming from another planet, I'm not so sure they would have any frame of reference for that. So I don't think, even though there's obviously, there's an area of this subject matter that, the ancient aliens, for example.
Anunnaki.
The theory of ancient aliens. And so there are people that do think they were here before, and the our ancient ancestors knew about them, but this information was somehow lost or suppressed or whatever. That's one theory. So clearly, but I mean, barring that theory, assuming the history that we believe to be true is true, I'm not so sure they wouldn't even know what you're talking about. What a flying saucer, a spaceship from another world. What does that even mean? As far as the ancient mind would have been concerned. If you could go back and talk to the 12 apostles, would they have had a frame of reference for that? I mean, the Jewish people believed, up until, I guess around the Middle Ages when it started to change, that this was a massive plane, a flat plane, and then there was this dome that covered the plane, and above the dome was water, and beyond that water was the kingdom of heaven where God was. And when it rained, it's because God opened up the doors, and some of that celestial water fell down. They believed the stars were, lanterns being hung from that ceiling. So to talk to them about other solar systems, or even the process of evolution, to assume that, maybe we've been here for, so many billions of years. What happens if there is a civilization out there that had 1 billion, 2, 3, or 4 billion years more evolution than we've had? Would they have the technology? If they didn't destroy themselves with it, would they have the technology to travel across vast distances very quickly, sort of like what you see in Star Trek? I guess it's possible, but could the people from the ancient world understand this? Would they understand a show like Star Trek? No, I don't think they would have. So we have a little bit of an advantage with demons and ghosts because there's a lot of precedent there. UFOs, not so much. So Erica, let's start there. I mean, when you're going into a case, how do you build the framework? Where does it start for you? Is it the 1940s? Is it Roswell? Where does it start for you in terms of piecing together and using logical extrapolation to fill in the gaps?
You know what? That's again a great question. You're good at asking great questions. I think for me, because I've now kind of turned my focus on historical preservation, and archiving. I've got just an incredible archive here, and as I look back at the history of things, I mean, I definitely believe that Roswell was inserted into the narrative. I think that a lot of these big cases were inserted into the seeded into the public consciousness to try to distract us from other things that were going on behind the scenes. I definitely believe that, especially in ufology, that there's been a need for the government, the intelligence community, to actively monitor things for a national security perspective, and I get that, and so I look back at some of these cases, and my thought process and the way I investigate things has completely changed, from when I first started this. I mean, I was, as you mentioned in the bio, very much about, abduction research and different things like that. And now, as I look at some of the behind the scenes documents that I have, I feel that maybe there is perhaps they were using this as a means to continue MK Ultra type programs. Which has been quite concerning and eye-opening for me. So I don't know. But back to your original question, how do I start to investigate, cases? I think when something's coming in, you have to interview the witness. You have to, know where military bases are. You have to know what's been inserted into that particular area. You take Skinwalker Ranch and the surrounding areas, and was that perhaps a psyop? Was something inserted into the narrative to hide something else? And so, you put things through all these paces. You look for mundane explanations first, like you do, I'm sure, and then you rule out, everything else. And it's a lengthy process, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And, I definitely can look back at cases that I investigated, 10 years ago and think, wow, wait a minute. I mean, now would I jump to the conclusions I did? No, I've learned a lot more. So, but it's a cool process, I love investigating. I love digging into things, even though it makes certain people uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, I
Good
think
thing to do.
it is, and I think that discomfort is where the truth can be found. I think a lot of the reasons why we don't, even in the work that we do in terms of our own little arena of the paranormal, a lot of the reasons why people have problems is because they're not willing to step into that uncomfortable zone of the unknown, and because they want to play it safe. And I think we're kind of programmed to make safe decisions. Not risky ones. Most people don't make, unless they get off on risk, they don't tend to make risky decisions, most people. So in most cases, then what that means is ignorance is preferred. The old adage, ignorance is bliss. And I think that applies to both of our respective worlds of the paranormal. Certainly, especially perhaps more so with UFOs, because there is that government aspect. We don't really have too much there. I mean, there's conspiracies out there about the government perhaps knowing more about demons than the church, but I don't, those are far and few between. Most of the time, the government and demons, other than the fact that maybe our politicians are pretty much demon-like, outside of that, I'm not so sure that the two worlds meet very often. But UFOs and government conspiracy, they go hand in hand.
Lord,
yeah,
from
the very beginning, ever since. I mean, Roswell was, like you said, inserted into the narrative, perhaps, and maybe as a distraction. And there's been some strange things happening recently, which is why I've been getting really into this subject more so than I used to, for a couple of reasons. Number one, in the past several years, we've been getting more cases with people that are coming to us for spiritual problem resolution, but their explanations for what's going on actually matches more closely to a alien abduction scenario. Yeah, than a demon. And because a lot of people have been programmed in the Christian worldview to think that aliens are basically a demonic disguise to trick us for some reason, they come to a priest rather than to maybe somebody that's more experienced in dealing with the UFO side of it, like you. And so at this point, it's an interesting conundrum because I mean, anytime we've had anything that had to do with what we suspected to be alien involvement, I mean, I'll be honest, that's when it really starts to stump me, because the normal methods don't work. The normal things that we try to do don't work. It has its completely own characteristic altogether. And I've even had my own experiences I've talked about on this show that have led even more credibility, at least for me. I mean, I guess it's my own personal experience, so it's my word against everyone else's. But I mean, it's my experience, and it's changed me because I've had this, and I know that no, this is not like dealing with demons. This is not like dealing with ghosts. This is a completely different thing altogether, and it's a very disturbing experience when it occurs. There's something very nefarious about it, and the fact that the government conspiracies and covering it up, but yet they're not doing that now, Erica. So what's going on? I mean, because right now, unless this is another part of their game, but why are they now starting to come forward and say, we've seen these things? They're starting to release reports. You get this guy in Israel who used to work for, I guess, a top government agency out there, talking about how there's an intergalactic conference of different species.
Former Canadian.
And the Canadian, there's a Canadian one saying something similar to that. I mean, what changed? I mean, the only thing that's changed for us is COVID-19, but yet at the same time as COVID-19, they started coming out with all of these really radical ideas that before would have been suppressed. So what's going on about that? With that,
it is a very interesting thing, and I think when the New York Times article broke in 2017, it was like, wow, here you've got the UFO topic, you've got fighter pilots and professional people that are politicians who are trying to shine a light on things. And had I not know what I know now, I would think, oh, hey, this is disclosure. Yeah. I now they did the first initial article and then some subsequent things, but over time, those people have they've devolved into things that are absolutely crazy. And so for me, I think it's like it's 20 steps forward and then 100 steps back. And so while all of a sudden, when you've got the chance to make this topic serious, to engage people in the scientific community, while all of a sudden are these people speaking at conferences where they're talking about, the Galactic Federation and all of this stuff that is just it's nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, it really truly is, in my
Nonsense.
opinion. And I think also it's interesting to see how you've got these different connections with the group of people that are promoting this disclosure, how they've operated behind the scenes for decades, kind of trying to steer this narrative, create distrust with the government, insert, the anti-masking, anti-COVID, all of these things where, this subject should be about scientific research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It should be about, stepping back and looking at things and not inserting politics or religion into the subject. But that's what has been done. That's what's being done, I think. And that's, to me, it's not a good place to go, or to because you get these ideas, you've had these experiences, and then you go to conferences and somebody's telling you that they're the, blue avians and things. And a lot of, I could go on and on and on. But, some of these things have some very dark stuff going on around it, and a lot of that is white supremacy. You have a lot of this. It's really disturbing. A lot of these people that have a fascist kind of agenda, and that's, to me, has just been stupefying. Yeah. I mean, you go back and you look at pictures of the blue avians, look at the benevolent space brothers. Well, I mean, isn't it interesting that they're blonde haired, blue eyed?
Yeah. Yeah.
They got the Nordics too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
they all do. They tend to be.
Yeah, the reptilians.
But they're not the good guys, though. No one says the reptilians are the good guys.
Right. No, they're not. They're the bad guys, apparently. Yeah.
So that's just been a trip to me, because I did not expect to learn what I've learned, and I'm really grateful that I have the opportunity to look back historically, to go through my archives. I've done a lot of work with regard to specific people involved in the UFO community and who've been shaping it for a long time. And we got to step back, and we've got to really look at the information that we're getting and realize that there are some really nefarious things going on. And you can use the love and light, and we are, these wonderful beings, and people are here to give us spiritual messages and to save the planet. And then you dig a little bit deeper, and it's like, not so much. Nope.
Well, it sort of gets into almost like a cult-like sort of environment. Like I think of Heaven's Gate, for example,
right?
Which was sort of a UFO cult. And I remember during the Halley's Comet, the Hale-Bopp Comet, when all that was going down. And I can tell you, the spiritual environment was strange during that time. It was. I was having some very bizarre experiences during that time. I had my first out-of-body experiences during that time. And they were happening on a regular basis. It was very bizarre. So I didn't know anything about Heaven's Gate at the time it was happening. I do remember going out and looking at the Hale-Bopp, because it was a fascinating thing. You could even see it during the day. I then later, as I started doing some retroactive research, saw that there was this entire cult, that their whole plot was to ascend to this UFO that was hiding behind the Hale-Bopp to take them off to a better world. And, they basically all, killed themselves in order to achieve this ascension. And I just thought, wow, archetypally, that's pretty strange with the things that I was experiencing. I mean, again, I'm a pretty empathic person, so I kind of pick up on the energy that's around me, which for good or bad. And I was experiencing things that were very much the archetype of ascension during that time. I thought that's really, really strange that those things happened at the same time. But what it did tell me about is how quickly people become imbalanced when they start researching and studying the paranormal. And UFO research is definitely not immune to this, as you have just indicated.
Right.
So do you think we have lost our objectivity, or do you think it has a lot more to do with nefarious objectives being inserted into the entire research program?
Yeah, I think it's I think that, the subject's been tainted since the 40s, since Roswell. I mean, I think there are, there's document after document talking about this and talking about different people at Stanford Research Institute back in the 70s who were doing remote viewing, who actually received their first batch of funding thanks to Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. And so it's like, and these are the same people that are steering the narrative now. And it's like, is this really about, what is this about? Is this about learning how to control people and shape opinions, as we see right now, which just goes on so much, especially on the internet? I mean, it's really easy to mold people's beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, when I look at some of these people and some of their agendas and some of the things behind the scenes, and I step away from looking at the UFO aspect, but look at the side of the intelligence community, look at different things that were going on in the world at that time frame, it gives me a bit of a broader perspective. And you can see how these things are playing out. But when your head's down and you're so focused on UFOs, sometimes you don't have that ability to see the larger picture. Yeah. And that's important.
Do you find that there are UFO narratives existent in other cultures that haven't been so dominated by, white European influence? Do you find that perhaps in places, maybe remote countries in Africa or even South America, that there is a framework for this that has taken on a life of its own? Because I know in Christianity, for example, there are some pre-Constantine Christian communities that still exist, because what happened is, before Constantine Christianized the empire, there were Christians that went off into Asia and became hermits and stayed out there and became influenced by Taoism and Buddhism and other Eastern philosophies, that it became its own Christian community. And even though they're small, they still exist. And none of the influences of the politics of Constantine, that eventually the church that became part of the, Orthodox Christianity. I'm not talking Orthodox in the capital O sense, the little o Orthodox, in terms of general conventional Christianity. That's been very politically influenced because of what happened in the Roman Empire back then. So it's interesting to see this community out there, completely pure and like original Christianity. Of course, now it's been influenced by other things, but still not the same degree. Do you find that happens with UFOs? Have you ever studied it like in other places where, again, white European influence? Not that there's not many places on this planet where that isn't the case, but certainly there are still locations where it's not a prominent feature.
And that's great. And I remember you and I had this discussion on my show, talking about different indigenous peoples. And it's, you do go back and you look at, the Aborigines, you go back and look at Native Americans and some of these wonderful cultures. Yeah. That were, they were tuned into things. They were tuned into things that were going on. They could, read, they used their intuition. And that was really a deep thought right there. That's scary. Don't ever quote me on that one. It's been a long day. Yeah. But it's you look at that and it's fascinating. I love, researching all of this and the history and the myth and belief systems and practices. It's fascinating, but I think it is hard because it has been influenced.
Yes, it has.
Their message is getting out and people can say, well, this was, the ancient alien theorists say that these things were taking place and that, this culture believed in A, B, C, and D. And that's, again, coming from our, tainted perspective, I think, or a narrative that is trying to be pushed upon us. So
they're trying to gear us in a certain direction and manipulate us.
Right.
Well, Erica, I think you and I have always gotten along very well because we're sort of very much the same in our own, again, respective area of research. I get the impression that because you go against the grain of a lot of this narrative, that is just taken for granted in the UFO community, that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I'm very similar in my own with the things that I talk about with demons and ghosts. I sort of demystify it a lot. I take a lot of the mystery and fun out of it, and it pisses off a lot of people in the paranormal world. And I mean, honestly, I would say that a lot of the problems that I have with people attacking me comes from the fact that I'm taking the fun out of it because I'm coming down with some very concrete explanations for certain things. I do not jump the gun and say, "Oh, this is a demon" every time. In fact, most of the time, I'm the first one to say this person needs psychiatric help. So it goes against the grain. Again, even when I talk about things like demons and with ghosts, particularly when I talk about how people, think about the continuity of consciousness. And I come back and say, well, consciousness is a product of brain activity and you don't take your brain with you. So then consciousness, as we understand it, is not something that ghosts could possibly possess. It's illogical to even assume that. That doesn't mean there's not fundamental properties of awareness that are inherent within the universe. I think that's really what ghosts might possess, and that's more instinctual. But people don't like when I talk about that because it takes away the fun. They want to believe that, you're like some incorporeal thing that you think just like you do, just like you did when you were alive, kind of like Casper, floating through the walls. And it's just not like that at all. And they get really angry when I remind them of this, or if I get on a show and I talk about this. In fact, a lot of times it gets edited out of the show and they just take the parts that I say that they do like. I'm sure you experience this with UFOs, right? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, it does. And trust me, I didn't want to take the fun out of this subject. I was a lot happier when I was thinking, the tall Nordics were coming to town. But that's just, it's not the case. And it has been hard, and I have been attacked. For years, because I've been trying to shine a light on this. And I know that there are definitely, some of these little trolling communities are quite interesting, as we've, experienced. And so it is interesting. You are messing with somebody's belief systems. You're messing with somebody's agenda. You're messing with people's monetary gains.
Oh yeah.
And, and that when you start digging into some of the bigger cases and specific things, you're messing with people, and some of these people don't play nice. And so it is interesting.
Yeah. There's been more than one person suicided in this line of work because of things that they came out with.
It can
get ugly. It can get ugly.
It can. And I having had the experiences I've had where I've had, people walk into, my life, my business, different things, with very specific agendas, it can get a little uneasy. I ask myself, okay, what am I doing this for at the end of the day? And some days I can answer that a little bit better than others because it's hard.
It is hard. And I know what you're talking about. I've gone through it on my own way. I've had to put up security cameras and, upgrade a lot of things that before I used to take for granted. I very rarely ever go anywhere not armed these days because the threats have become so regular and so common that, I have to be extra cautious. And it's all because, like you just said, it so eloquently that we're messing with people's ideologies, their livelihoods, their paradigms, and nobody wants that. But for me, authenticity and truth are higher than feeling good and comfortable. So, if that means having to rethink the way a certain system that I've always believed in or adopted, if that means that it has to change, well, then so be it. I'd rather have the truth than to live, in this blissful ignorance and be completely absorbed in a lie. But do you
Thank you for re-inspiring me.
Oh, well, great. I hope
I needed that little.
I think we need to kind of, reinforce each other, and realize that we're not alone, even though it sometimes feels, I think, that we are.
Well, it can be very defeating, especially when it comes one after another, after another, after another. And you're like, why am I even doing this anymore?
Well, particularly not getting paid for it. I mean, as well as I do.
This is
paying for it.
You're paying to do it. You're paying to be.
Yeah.
It ends up coming out of your pocket to do this kind of work, Yeah. It's not lucrative. So it's like it's a full-time and a half job, and it's one that you end up paying for to do. And you're like, why am I paying all this money to do this, to feel this way, to be treated this way? Eventually you start to question your own sanity. But do you think, Erica, that anybody out there really knows the truth? Or do you think it's impossible to find out at this point? You don't think so?
You know what? No, I think that all the crashed flying saucers and all this, the government is keeping things from us. I mean, come on. I don't think they know their, one end from the other.
Ass, I'll say it for you.
Yeah, thank you.
The ass from the elbow.
Yeah, it's just like, really, no, we really don't. I think we're paying attention to things that are happening on our planet, I think, I just don't think there has ever been any understanding of what this is. And I know that that's unfortunate because there's so many wonderful mysteries. I had the pleasure of going to Norway, and I always talk about that because it was probably the best 2 weeks, one of the best periods of time in my life. And over there's a little teeny valley called the Hessdalen Valley. And there's a group of researchers who've been studying unidentified aerial phenomena for 35 years. And they've received government funding. They have different universities from all over Europe who are actively engaged in researching data and finding new ways to use science to do this. And I mean, that for me was to go over there and to see how just nuts and bolts, but yet, they understand there's something more, and they're using science to bridge that gap without all of inserting all these belief systems. And it was so cool and so empowering to see that, and that's what I think here in America we lack, because
it's nice to see. It's nice to see people working together to find the truth. Right. Whereas on our side of the fence, it just seems like everybody's taking a little bit of truth and a little bit of mystery, and then they're just running with it to push either an agenda or to make money off of it.
Right. Yeah. It's really. It's interesting, but that was really it was so cool. I was over there and I got to, I was sitting at a table with two Italian scientists, a French scientist, Greek, and it was just, and, the Norwegians. And I'm just sitting here going, this is absolutely unbelievable. And it was really funny though, because I had, everybody, the person from a certain country, which shall remain nameless. He kind of reached over, to me, kind of leaned in, and he's like, "What do you think you're doing here? This is about science." The scientist.
Okay.
And I'm like, good point. But, I do have a means to get information forward, and I love the subject. And if there's something of merit, then I want to talk about it. Everybody else, it was just one of those things. I think it's just everybody else was just so amazing, down to earth, kind.
They should have respected you for seeing their perspective on things and trying to get to the truth.
Well,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, you would think.
To be a. What?
I know. And I guess, kind of playing the devil's advocate here, having an argument with myself about this. But it's like when you are trying to use science and you are trying to obtain funding and different things, and then you have all of these people in a field that are kind of interesting. I can understand that need to say, wait a minute, back off, because we don't want to be labeled as a kook and things. So I get it, but it was interesting. But I have to just, finish this by telling you that they take kids. This is like my Grandma Moses moment. Students from the engineering college, and Yeah, I know. So what happened to the time?
We got old.
Oh, you ain't kidding. I think that, so twice a year, students come, they send students to different locations, up on the top of mountains. And this is really pretty harsh climate. And they are collecting information. And it was so cool just to see their excitement. They were, burned out and tired because they were, in really ruthless conditions and things, but it was just really neat. I mean, it was, I don't know. It doesn't get much better than that for me.
Well, people actually showing pure passion for the work.
Yeah.
That's something that some of us are lacking in the West.
Well, I think it goes back to a lot of the things that Eric has already kind of touched on, and that there is this belief system inserted into it, and science isn't supposed to be about belief. One of the things that I have hated out of this whole COVID thing is trust the science. It's like, no, we don't trust science. We prove science. Trust is for faith. Faith is for religion. Faith is for belief systems. Science isn't supposed to be a belief system, but they've converted it into that. And they have the ideologies contrasting and competing to prove it, just like, it's almost like Protestants and Catholics all over again during the Reformation. It's the same thing that's going on. But I mean, I remember back as an undergrad when I was studying psychology, one of the required courses was research methods, which became the prerequisite to that was statistics. And I was actually quite good at statistics. And then when we got to research methods, then we had to actually apply those statistical theories to creating studies. And through the course of this, I started to get very uncomfortable. It was like I loved my entire, education in psychology. I really enjoyed every class I took except for this one. And this is why. When we were actually having to apply these methods to create a study, I saw just how impossible it was to do it objectively. Everything we did had to be about, I've got a theory, I want to prove it, but it wasn't handled that way. It was more along the lines of, what do you want to prove? Well, then you can basically engineer your studies to prove whatever you want. I think that kind of happened with the food pyramid. I know you hear about how unhealthy the food pyramid really is. That was like the gold standard for forever.
So what are they saying now?
Well, I think what they're saying, I know.
Can I eat eggs again?
Well, now they've inverted it. Now they're saying the fats are good and the carbohydrates are bad. That's what they're saying. That's the whole basis of the keto diet. It's like it's the inverted, really. More meat, more fat, and stay away from carbohydrates and the simple sugars. It's just like diabetes and it's like it's changing. And I can't even tell you how many times I would turn on, the social media and I get inundated with news. And one week it would say, scientists confirm, drinking more than 1 cup of coffee a day causes cancer. And then a week later, I kid you not, a week later, the same source, the same journal, the same says, scientists say drinking more than 1 cup of coffee a day fights cancer. And I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways. Wow. The objectivity is dead. It's dead. So it doesn't surprise me if it's permeating medicine and health and all of these very concrete disciplines. Why would it not be very much influencing things like, the paranormal, UFO research? I would think it, because that's so intangible. You can't just go and be like, well, we've got this UFO that we can go look at. So let's all go look at it. Let's break it up. Let's see what we've got here. There's no proof that the government ever acquired a UFO of their own to reverse engineer. Yeah, we don't have proof of that.
I hate to say that because again, you're
breaking the
going
paradigms
against the grain, and oh Lord, somebody pay for my therapy, do something. But it's fascinating to me. It really is.
Do you think that? There's another theory. What are your thoughts on this one? That we've been on this planet a long time, and even though evolution, something seemed to have happened that we can't fully understand. It seems like that our evolution in particular accelerated at an unnatural rate, almost as some would say, it was aided along perhaps by some higher intelligence. But let's just say for a moment that, it was a natural aspect of the evolutionary process on this planet. And, this one form of primate became Homo sapien. We've been Homo sapiens for a long time. And even though we've gone through different ages and different technological developments and whatnot, nothing has been as radical as what happened since the start of the computer age. This is radical transition. This is not like, you could take like a steam engine, perhaps, from the Industrial Revolution and go back a couple hundred years, and they might be fascinated by it, but they would understand how it works. They would say, yeah, why didn't we think of this? It wouldn't be completely out of the range of understanding. You could probably go back to Leonardo da Vinci and say, here's a steam engine, and he'd be able to figure it out. But when you start getting into like computer chips and when you take it like a circuit board apart and you look at this stuff, it doesn't even look like it could possibly be something that we created. So there are people, I'm not saying this is true. I'm just, I'm just playing the devil's advocate with this theory. There are people that say that Roswell happened and that the ship was, confiscated by the U.S. government and brought over to, I guess, Area 51 or wherever. And they reverse engineered it and have been developing this radical technology ever since. Do you think there's any credibility to that? Or do you really attribute the computer age to just pure human innovation?
Oh, yoy. How many friends am I going to influence tonight? Way to win friends and influence
How many are you going to lose? How many are you going to lose?
I don't know. I mean, where's the proof?
Yeah.
At some
never
point
any
you have
proof.
to cough up the evidence, and you just can't. Here you've got these tales inserted into the narrative by specific people in the government and specific people that are, like I said, have a vested interest in making money, and I really definitely, it's important to monitor activity. And in the UFO world, you've got a bunch of nerds who are going out to the border of Dugway or Area 51, and I'm a nerd. I totally wear my nerd flag. But it's like, what better way for a foreign adversary to try to find out information about what we're testing than to insert themselves into this subject. Yeah. And I think a lot of, there's been talk that, Roswell was kind of one of those things. You put something out there, you see where things come in. And so I don't know, but I definitely think that's a big old red herring. I think the crash saucers at Area 51 and reverse technology, reverse engineering, I think that's another myth.
Yeah. Another myth.
I wish it wasn't. I think that would be really cool.
It's really fascinating. We even have a Star Trek that was about that. I think it was Star Trek Voyager did an entire 2-part episode on that very thing. That there was it wasn't an alien ship, but it was a time ship. So basically, in that episode, it was a ship from the 27th century that crashed in the 1960s, and I guess a sort of Bill Gates type character was able to obtain the crash ship and then reverse engineer and create the computer age. It's
Hollywood.
It's great Hollywood, but not necessarily great reality.
No, and it is interesting too. There's so many areas to study in the UFO world.
Yeah.
If you were to really dig into Hollywood and the way Hollywood has been used, I think, to manipulate our thought process, in different things. And then you look at the UFO subject and dig into that. I think that would be really fascinating. And even with like Close Encounters, and, the X-Files, all of those things had a big part of my, growing up, E.T., all of these things.
Pop culture.
So
stuff.
Was that just, were those things, why were those things put out there?
But then you have guys like Bob Lazar come forward. And I don't know what your thoughts are on him.
Well, if my face doesn't say it all.
Yeah, exactly. You've heard different things about that guy, but he told a pretty pretty compelling story, and people just jumped on the bandwagon without even vetting any of it.
Pretty much. Yes.
That's what happens.
And that's still a problem. I mean, I think when again, you look at the specific groups of people or group of people that are creating this and pushing forward stuff to make money, it's pretty interesting. But there have been a few researchers who've done pretty deep dives into his background and things. And there's some questions that, have not been adequately answered. And I think when the people who are supporting him are coming out and saying, well, it's if you're questioning things, they erased his history because blah, 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 blah. I mean, they're trying to cover up. They're just using their own, I don't even know how to say it, just their own PR, to try to dissuade people. And even, now there's the Collins elite. There are people in that group, that specific group, that are trying to say that the government, that certain bad actors in the government that believed in the demonic aspect of ufology, that they've tried to shut down funding for UFO research. And it's just like, again,
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Prove it.
Yeah,
Prove it.
That's the problem. There's just never enough proof to be able to come to the conclusion that anything is actually what's going on, and that's what makes it so difficult.
There's little teasers of truth and things that
interlinked with bias and paradigm and motivation, right, and everything else. But we are talking with Erica Lukes about UFO Disclosure and what's really going on out there. Getting ready for another segment, but first, a short break. Don't go away.
Showing off. Don't wanna have to wait tonight. Wait tonight. Better off. I'm gonna find my way tonight. Wait tonight. Won't you talk to me? I wanna heal your sorrows. Talk to me. We'll make a new tomorrow. Talk to me. One night to find the answer. Talk to me. What makes this heart beat faster? What makes this heart beat faster?
Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark. We are talking with Erica Lukes about UFO Disclosure, among other things. And we'll be taking your questions from the YouTube chat room, all across social media, everywhere that we are simulcasting right now, including even Spreaker. Our moderators are checking your questions, and we'll put them in the YouTube chat for us to see, and then we might talk about it on the air. But we prefer you call us, so call us at 347-338-1860. That's 347-338-1860, PIN number 1100999. You can also call us international on Skype for free by dialing up Eye of the Seer, all one word. Don't go away. before we went to break, we've been talking all about all the things that just seem like fabrications and distractions and wild imaginings about what things might mean and the places that some of these crazy theories come from. But Erica, looking at the actual objective content, what do we know? Like, what can we be certain of in regards to this subject matter?
Well, that's a really good question, and I really don't know what. And I scratch my head, but I think what we do know. Well, okay, I mean, look to Norway, look to other countries who are engaging this in a logical way, a thoughtful way. And I think that what we do know is that the American ufology, that community is not necessarily a healthy community. There are people that have some serious issues. And I think that, as a result, they kind of like with the paranormal thing, it's like you are attracted to things and then you can potentially be in a very vulnerable situation. And I think that's happened here, and nobody seems to be stepping up and taking the lead in the community to try to change things and to try to protect people and to get good information out. But there is something genuine. I don't know what it is. I can't say it's ET, and I can't say it's Grandma Moses back from the dead. But it is worthy of study. It's worthy of reverence, and I do, there is something that is we can't explain. What is it? I want to know.
Yeah.
And I would, I don't know. It's crazy.
It's done on purpose to keep us guessing and keep us confused. I mean, just look at
or sister, could it just simply be that people are going about this so subjectively that now we can't tell the forest from the trees?
I think it's going to be hard to go back to objectively when you've got 60 plus years, 70 plus years of interjecting agendas into little bits of truth. I mean, with a lot of documents being declassified in the last few years, we've learned of all these projects that were clandestine. And one of them that I can recall is a project, I think it was called Bluebeam, where it talks about an alien invasion that is a hoax, but it's to throw the population basically off the track of what the governments are actually doing. Right. You might be able to look that up now. I believe it was called Project Bluebeam. Stephen Greer talks about it.
Well, it's definitely interesting. See, this is where I need to take acting classes. Take some acting classes. Learn how to hide your emotion. Oh Lord. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting, and I think it does. It does take your power away, your personal power. When you're being manipulated and being told how to think, where to go. I mean, it's like you lose some of that ability to just go back and be intuitive. And so when I'm talking to people, my radio show, my YouTube show, I always just say, if you have personal experiences, keep them close to you, and don't look outside for answers. Because sometimes, you're getting answers that aren't truthful, and it doesn't help you as a spiritual being, as a human being. And
people also try to manipulate you too, and take advantage of you for their own forward momentum.
Right.
Yeah.
They do. And it's interesting. I talk about this on my show a lot too, because it's been very interesting for me to go to different conferences, and needless to say, I'm not really asked to be on the speaking circuit these days because I'm Miss Naughty right here in the UFO world. I'm not.
You're the bad child.
I am kind of the bad child.
You're amongst friends then, don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I get that's a good thing, I think.
You are definitely amongst friends.
That's good. We got to cause some trouble, and make people think.
Yeah.
But, it's like you can go to these conferences and you're you're walking by these conference rooms of people that are having, whether they're having a psychological issue, whether they're just very gullible, but people are being led, they're doing group hypnosis. And then the person who is talking to these people is inserting that narrative. These are benevolent beings and you are blessed. Your DNA is sacred. And, this is, all of this crap, and it really is detrimental to a person's emotional and spiritual well-being to have that kind of stuff going on. Right. Yeah. And it's really wrong.
Father Chris, you're down in Australia and you've been in the UK. So, I mean, what's the UFO climate like there? Erica's been talking about how Norway seems to be a better example to follow than what clearly we're doing in the United States, which I think we're doing everything wrong in just about every level. But, so UFOs, why not? Right. I mean, we're screwing everything else up. Let's screw up the UFOs too. But what's it like? What is it like out there? UFO culture and, in Australia?
I'm not aware of much at all. Although, I would guess that Australians would be quicker to believe in UFOs than in God.
Yeah.
I've kind of had both ends of this. I mean, when I was a young lad growing up in England, we had the crop circles phenomenon, if you remember that, which have been debunked, completely. The guys that did it literally have shown the videos of them doing it for a laugh, to see what attention they could get. So I went from the kind of high. I remember the Hale Bopp thing as well. It's interesting that you mentioned that. I remember that phenomenon, and I was, we were always fascinated with the sort of the extraterrestrial activity, literally, the comets and the planets and all the rest of it. So I kind of grew up in that milieu, and now I'm out here. But I mean, like, it might be because I'm not particularly looking for it as well, so I have to declare that interest. But I'm not aware of anything. You see, I was fascinated by your use of the word intuition. You talked about the lack of that in the West. I think the other word I thought of was curiosity. There's a lack of curiosity, and it's not. And I just wanted to say that it's not always been lacking. You rightly draw attention to the idea that indigenous cultures, and of course in Australia we have Aboriginal indigenous culture here. They are more ready to use that kind of, or they've not lost it. But in the West, we've had this demystification process that sort of kicked in along with the Enlightenment. But I think there's such an irony to this, and it does tap into science, which is at the heart of a lot of this stuff about UFOs. That the scientific method came out of that sense of curiosity and wanting to account for experience, and can we repeat an experience? Can we, and subtract and add, and what difference does that make? But we've come like almost to the the end of that curiosity, because now we have scientism. And the opposite is true. We're not allowed to question the science or the scientists. And you think, what? That's the whole point of science is that you can question it. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know what point I'm trying to make, but I know that I was fired off by you using the term intuition, and I think people ought to nurture that more. I mean, and especially in the church, because look at the effect of demystification in the church. Well, what is it? It's just some kind of theatrical production we put on every week.
Reduced to entertainment. It's reduced to entertainment is what it is. And that's obviously not what church is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be entertaining. It's supposed to be enriching and cultivating of spiritual realization. Calling in from the 802 area code in what I believe is the state of Vermont. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, Bishop Bryan. It's Peter.
Hello, Peter.
Hey, Pete.
Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Sister Mary Joan. Hi, Father Yates, Erica.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. So my question that I'm going to pose to Erica, and obviously based on from what I've been hearing through the conversation so far this evening, is that there's so much unknown. But my question kind of to pose is, what's the possibility that UFOs are extra dimensional and not of our galaxy, or at least this plane of our galaxy? Because it seems to me that if there were things flying out, as vast as space is, we would have a little better understanding of like hearing radio signals and stuff coming from within. But it seems that that UFOs don't seem to admit that, or and other shows like the Dead Files, that when the medium on the show, and I'm blanking on her name right now, and I can't.
Amy Allen.
Amy Allen.
Amy Allen. Yeah, Amy. When she talks about aliens, in a sense, she describes it as extra dimensional. And I know that the science of this can't even remotely possibly be calculated or in any way, shape, or form of science that we have currently to produce. But I'm just curious of what your thoughts are with UFOs being of another dimension rather than of our current galaxy's neighbors.
Good question. Erica, what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I mean, I think that's definitely something to think about. And I go back to, I mean, if there were extraterrestrials that were coming to Earth and they were threatening our livelihood, would we be building space motels? Would we be sending up civilians? Would we be doing, I mean, all of these things. And even with like the Skinwalker Ranch narrative, it's like, you've allegedly got these things opening up and creatures coming out, but yet, and it's a threat and it's dangerous, but yet they're flying aircraft, commercial airlines over the ranch all the time. I mean, in different things. And so, I mean, I would definitely, I think that that's a good possibility. I don't know if, I don't know. I mean, right now, today, my thought is this isn't extraterrestrial, whatever it is.
So you think it's been here for as long as we have, perhaps?
Perhaps, yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
And that's the thing, we just don't know. I mean, we don't even know about our own planet, right. And there's so many things to discover. So who knows?
Do you think we don't know what's under the sea?
We don't. But I mean, do you think though that there's a chance that the reason that we don't know is that they are so far beyond us in terms of intellectual capacity, perhaps even spiritual capacity, that there's no relationship there? So it's kind of like, perhaps us trying to relate to like an ant or a mosquito. I mean, we're not going to have deep conversations with them. They're going to be barely aware of what.
Depends.
I mean, well, I guess some people might, right?
Depends on the day.
It depends on the day. Yeah. I mean, if you're biting my knee, I might talk to you, but it's not going to end well. But the thing is, do you think it's like that? Do you think do you think that might be an explanation? I mean, it's just as good as any other speculation, but what are your personal thoughts on why they could have been here all this time for as long as we have, and yet we still know next to nothing about what they are or who they are or why they're here?
Well, that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but what I can say, I feel fairly confident in is if there were truly an advanced extraterrestrial civilization coming here, would they have 2 arms, 2 eyes, a mouth, 2 legs? I mean, come on, it's like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, it's Star Trek does that as a part of like, the convenience of storytelling. But I mean, in reality, would they look anything like us?
Right. It makes it somewhat easier for the makeup artists.
Good point. Yes.
They do occasionally branch out from that, but it's very occasionally. Yeah.
Yeah. Great question, Peter. Thank you so much. Calling in now from the 503 area code in, I believe it's Oregon. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Doing well. How about you?
Hey, hello.
Hello.
Doing well. I actually have a story for you guys.
All right. We love stories. Go for it.
So this was actually passed down to me from my grandfather, who was a pilot in the Navy. Pretty crazy, as Ripley would say, believe it or not. But I was probably 12 or 13 when he sat my parents down, me down, my sister down, and he wanted to tell us about a UFO encounter he had while he was in the Navy. And my parents blew it off, and they don't believe in it. They still don't believe in it. But, my ears perked up, and I wanted to hear it. And so he said that they were training over the Gulf of Mexico, and there were 3 pilots, there were 3 aircraft, and out of nowhere, below them, really close to the water, he described it as a silver football, probably 20, 30 feet in length, shot out right above the water. And it was moving so fast, he said it had no exhaust. It was almost toying with them. It would gain altitude in a second, thousands of feet, and then drop, and then shoot out to the right and to the left. He said their eyes almost couldn't keep up with it. It was moving so fast. He said he was about to shit himself. He was so scared. He was trembling. They didn't have any weapons. It was just a training mission. So he said if he had something, he probably would have shot at it because he didn't know what the hell it was. He didn't know if it was the Chinese or, it was just so foreign to him. But they were low on fuel, and him and one other aircraft decided to peel back to base. When they peeled back to base, the third, one of his best friends, he teared up telling us this story, and I never saw my grandfather cry. Never. That third airman decided to chase it. He wanted to get it out of our airspace. And he said that when they got back to base, that third airman never came back. He never made it.
Oh, really? So this was all over this happened out of the ocean.
He said
Gulf of Mexico.
Couldn't tell if it came out of the ocean, but it shot below them so close to the water. It was shocking. And he said it didn't have any windows. It didn't have any doors. It got that close. He said he couldn't see a bolt on this thing.
So it was seamless. So Erica, now I know that there's been a lot of reports of these things originating under the sea, and things coming up out of the ocean. It didn't seem like this was a bit ambiguous in that respect, but it was in that general area. But these seamless craft, I know that we also have had other guests on this show that have talked about how they change shape, almost as if they don't follow the normal rules of, piece of machinery obviously is not going to be able to bend and mold itself into different quantities or different sizes like these things do. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, let me just ask the caller, if I may. What year was that, or the approximate time frame?
Oh, got it. It was probably the 50s, I would say.
In the 50s. And did they ever, was there ever any report of that anywhere? Did they talk about that? Because that would be really interesting. I'd like to talk to you about it a little bit more, actually. Sometime it's fascinating. And I would like to know more.
He said that, I wish he was still alive. I would get these details. And my parents, they don't believe in that stuff. But I remember him saying that when they got back, his locker had already been cleaned out. Mm-hmm. And they were told not to bring it up, not to talk about it. It never happened.
Yeah, they would have been deeply debriefed on something like that. I'm surprised he told you.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And I want to point, and if you've heard about NARCAP, or if you haven't heard about NARCAP, I would definitely look into NARCAP, because they have done exceptional work for the past 2 decades studying, taking case reports from military and civilian pilots. And they've done some great research, and that I would definitely recommend checking out NARCAP. But that's a fascinating story. And it really is, it's sad that people don't have a place to come forward to and tell their sightings reports to. That's why I do respect NARCAP a lot. But it must have been a very traumatic thing for everyone involved, especially since the third plane didn't come back.
Yeah, he said no one believed him. He would get home and he told his wife, and over the years, every once in a while he would bring it up, but it was just a big joke, and no one believed in aliens and that kind of stuff. And yeah, but I just thought it was very interesting, and I wonder, how many other service members have been abducted or shot out of the air.
Quite a few stories. Yeah, it goes back. I remember seeing documentaries and stories about Vietnam, World War II, the Foo Fighters, up into Desert Storm, Desert Shield, about these encounters with fighter pilots. It's a shame that obviously your grandfather experienced something to get so emotional. Coming from his generation, men don't cry, So yeah, something happened. It's just a shame that no one would believe him.
I mean, sister, I don't know what it's like for you in law enforcement, but I mean, we got regular calls about UFOs, basically. People see them all the time.
This was back in the UK?
In the UK, yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously they didn't dispatch us unless there was something that was a concern. I mean, I suppose in these days of drones, that was after I'd left that drones came about. But there was I don't know what it was like for you, but the switchboard was full of them.
Well, I worked in a metro county of Atlanta. And so, especially at nighttime with the night lights and stuff of the city, there weren't a lot of reports of stuff like that. But we did get the occasional report of a cryptid creeping around. And, we dealt with that as it came. And it usually was someone who had diminished capacity. But I've had some weird cases, though, in my time. That very, very few officers, when you experience something like that, you have to really know who your command staff is if you're going to go to them or not. But,
yeah, I mean, the problem is, because I've kind of seen crazy stuff, on the hill, but on the hills on night shift, and then you think, it's kind of 4 a.m. Did I just imagine that? Like, because I'm a natural skeptic, despite appearances.
Yeah, what are you doing on this show, right?
Yeah, no. I don't mean a skeptic about UFOs in general. What I mean is, if I have I'm not skeptical of other people's experiences, but if I have an experience, I want to make sure.
Yeah, I try to debunk.
I tear myself apart.
Yeah.
So I agree, and everyone should. But I tear myself apart and think, well, could it have been X, Y, or Z?
That's the way it should be. Yeah, that's the way you.
Yeah, and that's why I've not written anything about it or anything like that. But but you think, did I see that? Was I just sleep deprived? Was it, who knows? But yeah, and I've been to some of those military bases I'll just say in England, because then I won't get arrested for breaching the secret.
We know of the places in England.
Well, yes, I think you'll find we share them with the United States, some of them.
Right.
And so
back in the 80s, there's something happened over there. Yeah.
So, I've been to those kinds of places. And so I know the kind of, conventional secrets, if you know what I mean. But nothing to suggest, there's some kind of Roswell-like conspiracy going on in the UK, but certainly, if I believe my own eyes, then I've seen some things I can't explain.
Erica, what is the biggest, UFO conspiracy outside of the United States? What's the biggest one that's originated in another country that you know of?
Well, I think we were just kind of talking maybe a little bit about
right
about one of those.
An airfield in the
is that really the biggest one? The biggest one?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think that was, that's again one of those cases that, I mean, just has a life of its own and different politics involved and personalities and different people promoting narratives. And could that have been some sort of military test? I mean, I think that's a good possibility. And especially given some of the things, I've had Nick Redfern on my show multiple times, and he's kind of a jack of all trades and things. And he wrote a book on Rendlesham and the different types of tests that were going on in the area, and what the more mundane, explanation could be. And I definitely think that's something that I am looking at. And so that, to me, it's like the Roswell, it's the British Roswell.
Yeah.
And I think that's
technical innovation has to happen somewhere, doesn't it? And so imagine if in 1982, they had drones, they were developing drone technology, something which we all know what they are now, and wouldn't blink twice about seeing things hovering in the sky above us because we think that's a drone, but at some point they've got to be tested.
Right.
And when they're tested, necessarily, if they're tested in the sky, people see them. And so you go, and at that, in 1982, you'd say, I wouldn't have, what on earth is that?
Yeah, there were a lot of sightings of the Blackbird, I believe it's SR Blackbird, back in the 70s and 80s. They thought it was a UFO, and then it comes out, it's just a surveillance plane.
Right. I mean, it is really interesting. And there is a vested interest in different groups and the government trying to get in there and pull that information from the public. I think, you look at the purchase of different databases around the world, UFO databases, and could that potentially be because we're trying to sweep up information about some testing that we're doing? I don't know. But, you also look at some of the non-lethal weapons technologies that we've been experimenting with. I mean, even was it Delgado that was, working on a little microchip, an implant to control subjects and things. And so you look back, and that was back in the 60s, I believe. Right. And so you look at and now you've got the plasma, the talking ball of light, that can, communicate with you, and people, 10 years ago, and even today actually would say that that's extraterrestrial or of some sort of, fantastic origin, but there is that technology. It's there. It's being
there's also a financial incentive.
Right.
I mean, if somebody sees that, this or tries to sort of break down what they're seeing, it might give them an idea to come up with this technology themselves. Right. And then all of a sudden there's intellectual property rights, there's money involved. And so, I think good old capitalism can be a reason for covering things up. You think, well, if the government don't own this technology, if it gets replicated and then patented elsewhere, then all of a sudden there's financial implications, so I think there's some probably pretty mundane reasons for covering things up, as well as, more suspicious, spectacular reasons.
Right.
Absolutely.
I think that's true with a lot of areas as well, that you see conspiracies, not just with UFOs. Sister Mary Joan and Father Chris, I know that you've been watching the chat in YouTube, and I don't want to ignore anybody's questions that might have come in. Did you see any good ones that we should ask Erica or, about the subject tonight?
Well, there's one from Rick. He addressed it to Father Yates, and maybe you two would have a little bit more insight. Erica might have something to say about it too. It says, I have something I would like Bishop and Miss Lukes to comment on. The alien stuff in relation to Genesis 6, i.e. the book of Enoch.
I will just turn that question over to you.
And I will turn it over to you as well.
Clearly, this girl needs to go to church. Maybe.
Maybe.
Enoch, and it's some pretty fascinating stuff.
I have been asked about it before, actually, by anyway, an Australian
I think
a YouTuber.
I think everybody, at least, regardless of your experience with theology, is familiar with the conspiracy that the Nephilim,
the giants,
were maybe another species that came here from another planet. Ezekiel's wheel sounds a lot like a UFO encounter. So when you read the first chapter of Ezekiel, it sounds like it might be a close encounter of the of the third kind. So what, if there's a relationship there, now you're starting to get into an area that is kind of loosely referred to as exotheology. What ramifications does knowing that alien life, intelligent life exists off this planet, that it evolved somewhere else and is separate from us, what ramifications does that have for the religious worldviews? And there used to be a belief that if that ever got out and was proven, and so much what we're talking about tonight is to prove it. Let's say it was proven. How would that impact things like the church or people's religious beliefs? And it used to be believed, I guess back when people were more religious, that could have created an entire meltdown of society. I don't think that's necessarily true today. I'm not sure it would have even been true back then. But it does pose some interesting questions about things like, if this is a fallen universe, does that mean that does original sin apply to aliens on another planet, or is it just a problem that human beings had? These are all little questions that come up, philosophically, theologically, when you start talking about what place do aliens have in relationship to how religion would look at it. As far as like the Bible, I guess this gets into, I'm assuming what he's referring to is more like the ancient aliens kind of theories where the Bible might have little clues written into it that would suggest. I think the only answer we can give to that is the same one that Eric has been giving the entire night. We just don't know.
I also think though that the Bible would have been more explicit.
If they wanted to talk about that,
it's not as though. We say the Bible as though it's one book, and we all know it's a collection of lots of different types of literature.
There is the Book of Giants.
Yeah. So look, So I think if something as profound as that had taken place, they'd just have written it. Like they don't shirk away from murdering the Ammonites, and
possibly, but you could also take the other side of the argument, which is I think what a lot of people that do subscribe to this particular theory or conspiracy, depending upon how you want to look at it, the way that they look at it is that to the ancients, they wouldn't have known that these were aliens. They would have seen them as supernatural beings. So what Ezekiel saw, he interpreted to be God, but was it God, or was it an alien spacecraft that he thought was God because there was nothing that marvelous that could have created that experience in his world other than having some kind of divine vision? Were they angels, or were these alien beings coming out of a ship? That's the issue. So the question is, we know the Bible was written by man, inspired by God, perhaps. Yes. For those that of faith, it is inspired by God, but still written by man. There's still faith accounts written through the mind of the individual who experienced them, which means there's limitations there.
Because authorized by the church.
Yes.
We don't want to remove the power of the Holy Spirit that acts through the apostles. And so,
no, definitely.
So yes, it has authority because God gave it authority through the church.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. I know you know that.
Yeah.
Just making it explicit.
Yes. For those that might not be aware. Sure. And we've talked about before.
I was thinking theologically though about what you just said about the idea if they are aliens, then
do they need salvation? Do they need salvation?
Yeah. I think we've mentioned it before on the show that it wouldn't change my theology one jot.
No.
At all.
No.
I do think it's interesting, Erica, you're calling from Salt Lake City. And I just mentioned in the chat, I've only been to the USA once, and it was to Salt Lake City. So I've been to Salt Lake City. I love it. It's a beautiful place.
It is beautiful.
I have family there. Of course, and I'm not a Mormon, as you can tell, but it is where Mormons are based. And and we love Mormons, but I do think they are wrong. Obviously, otherwise I'd be a Mormon.
Yeah.
And it actually does relate to this topic, because the idea is within Mormonism is that after Jesus ascended, from Galilee, he then descended into North America.
Right. Hung out with the Indians for a while.
And hung out with the Indians. And of course, my objection to that is that it's totally unnecessary, because And you know, the Christian objection to that is to say, well, no, because it wasn't like Jesus went to Israel and died for the Israelites, and then he had to go to North America and do something with them. And then, you know, where's he go next? Bosnia-Herzegovina? You know, I mean, that actually this was a unified act of salvation for the whole of creation, actually, the whole cosmos, not just, you know, we fixate on the salvation of man because we are humans, you know, but actually it's the making new of the whole creation, which is the entire cosmos. And so that's why, coming back to the kind of specific question, that's why it doesn't worry me in the slightest whether there's aliens or whether, you know, in many ways it'd be surprising if there are not, given the creative power of God.
It's interesting too that, and I think I've mentioned it before on one of the other podcasts, is there are instances, more than several, of people who are having an abduction event happen, and they invoked the name of Christ, and whatever was coming in backed off.
That's interesting.
So I find that interesting, and it's not just one person, you know, some kook out in Podunkville. It's been several documented cases where they invoked their religious paradigm, invoked Christ, and the event stopped. So, I mean, there may be something to it.
I mean, it gets into that very gray area. And Erica, you talked a little bit about, you know, how there are, there's a group that may have suppressed some of this because of their belief that it's demonic and it's all demonic activity. It's all a demonic ruse. There are no aliens. I mean, let's face it, there's people out there that still think the earth is flat. And they're arguing this.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a superstitious. We're a superstitious
the world's
species.
Billionaires are doing their best to correct that by, you know, hopefully marketing space flight for.
If it becomes cheap in about 20 years, then that's going to go to the wayside. But you know, right now they're still going to say it's, you know, the elites are hiding it from us. So
good old Elon.
But I mean, what do you think about? Do you think there's a relationship there? You know, Sister Mary Joan's talking about how the rites of the church have worked in certain scenarios that people have had where, you know, something was coming at them very alien-like. They invoke the name of Christ and it backs off. I mean, do you think there's a relationship between what we are experiencing on our arena with ghosts and demons and what you're experiencing with the research of aliens and UFOs? Do you think there's some crossover there?
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing. You can't delineate. You can't, you know, I mean, I can't put a line here and say, this is where this, you know, drops off and this is where this comes into play and things. No, I mean, nobody knows.
No one knows. Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I think, you know, I mean, that is such a loaded thing for me to think about because we're powerful as human beings. We have gifts, we have intuition, we have, you know, the ability to, I feel, kind of shape our world, our reality. And so is that, you know, are we, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know. I was going someplace and then I had a menopausal moment. Just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
Just kidding. I'm not old, but just, I don't know. Anyway, I think
we're not getting any younger. It's okay.
Oh, I know.
It's just the way it is. Time goes fast.
There's a reason that you lose your eyesight when you get older. Is so you know.
Yeah.
So, but oh my God, because reality is quite special.
I was very foolish then. I got my eyes laser corrected in my 40s. So there you go. I was obviously silly.
Yeah. Well, hindsight, it's just 2020. But I mean, you know, I do think that there is something at play to try to take our power away, our personal power, to take, you know, to destabilize us, to desensitize us. And I think that is, you know, you when you get, especially with the internet now, don't mind me over here, it's, you know, you start to plug into these programs and you become so unconscious about your own power. Yeah. And that's really, really dangerous. And so I think when, you know, if we do find that power within us, we can accomplish great things. And if somebody has the power to cast off an abduction, to invoke the name of Christ, and their experience, changes, then that's a wonderful thing. And I can't discount any of these things because I just don't know at the end of the day.
What is the most terrifying UFO case that you have researched that's come across your desk? Which is the one that left you the most unsettled?
Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker.
I want to go there so
What
bad.
is it
It's
about
always funny.
Skinwalker Ranch that unsettles you?
I think it is the human element. I think that has been really something for me to see up close and personal. The way that the subject has been manipulated and the way people have been, in the area potentially harmed by something, and people are using UFOs as a cover story to harm people. To expose them to radiation or to do all of these things that we keep hearing are taking place at the ranch and things. But I mean, people have been harmed. There was a fellow, I interviewed his granddaughter that lived outside of the Skinwalker Ranch, just right next to the property. And, mind you, he'd lived there for decades and had never seen anything until Robert Bigelow bought the ranch. And then one night he was out messing with the irrigation system, and a bright beam of light came down and flew over him. And he was so frightened, and he thought he was going to be burned. And so he dove into an irrigation canal. And he was really severely traumatized him, but he also died of cancer. Whether there's a correlation there remains to be seen. But I think, for his granddaughter who I interviewed, she had so many questions about why was there no activity reported until this certain person bought the ranch. And when you look at the people that were involved in the ranch and UFO, the UFO field, some of the heads of the people in UFO organizations, these have been people who have been trained in psychological warfare and non-lethal weapons technologies. Wow. And so, that, and Utah is a big hotbed of testing, as we know. Utah has one of the largest concentrations of military and defense contractors in aerospace.
There's a lot going on out there in Utah and Nevada, for sure. It always has been.
It kind of gave me the creeps when we went there for.
I know. I remember you saying that. Yeah. And I mean, not that that's, that's not alien. This is something that's going on.
It's just the energy that the whole place gives off.
Right.
The whole state.
Yeah. And so, I mean, that to me is the most frightening. And and I know that that's not, that's a man-made thing, but that really has unnerved me to see some of this.
Well, it's not surprising as much as you might think, because I can tell you that out of all the things that I've done in my work, in my career, as an exorcist, as a priest, it's human evil that's always the most shocking and the most reprehensible. It's like demonic activity. It follows certain rules. And, you use those protocols that we have with the church, and people get better. But, a person can be attacked and assaulted for years by the demonic. You go in with exorcism, as long as they listen and they do what needs to be done to improve their relationship to God and whatever other things might be required, they heal, they get better. I can't say the same for victims of child abuse or victims of human evils. They seem to carry this forever. It damages them irrevocably in some cases, which is so much worse than a demonic possession. And it's its own kind of demonic activity, but it's like the evil that humans do. There's a show that we're watching. I'm actually introducing Sister Mary Joan to Millennium. I have all three seasons on DVD. I understand that they are coveted items. I bought them when they were out, so I've had them for a long time, and it's a fantastic show. There's a wonderful episode in season 2. I don't want to give too much detail away because Sister Mary Joan hasn't seen it yet.
Right, don't ruin it for me.
I'm not going to ruin it for you, but there's an episode where they're talking about demonic activity. And, and one of the characters says, we don't need demons. we're perfectly capable of torturing and condemning ourselves. We don't need demons to do that for us. We spend our entire lives wrecking everyone else's life. So why do you need a demon anymore? They're out of a job. We've taken over. So
I always, it's one of my pet peeves because it's a big cop out. People say, "Oh, they must have been possessed." No. Humans can degrade themselves to such a point that they become bloody awful.
Oh, the devil
evil.
made me do it. Argument.
Exactly.
That's a perfect example. The whole Conjuring thing. Conjuring 3 movie was based on that.
We've said in the past on this show. The only difference between Hitler and some other evil people is that he was also potent.
Yes.
And so some people are really evil and never really do anything because they're also just feeble. Cowards, that doesn't make them less evil.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
It's a battle, and there's no cop out, and that's why our message is pick up the cross and drag it up the hill.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to resist it, and it's why it's not popular.
No, because it's work. No one wants to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
We are talking about alien activity, UFO Disclosure, Skinwalker Ranch, taking your questions as well from both the chat room and for people who call in. Give us a call. Get into the queue now. We'll take you on the air, but we'll look at more questions from the various social media platforms. So log your question now, and Father Chris and Sister Mary Joan will bring it on the air too. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final part of Vestiges After Dark. We are talking with our very special and wonderful guest, Erica Lukes, about the nature of UFOs and the reality behind them. We're not bullshitting you tonight with crazy conspiracies, although we might be talking about how radical and crazy they might be. We're just talking about the facts, just getting down to what we know, which apparently is not very much. But we're also taking your questions. So call into the show, okay? 347-338-1860. That's 347-338-1860. PIN number 11009999. International call Skype at Eye of the Seer. We'll be back in just a moment. Don't go away. You know, one of the things that I have always found to be the most interesting conspiracy theory about UFOs and some of the wild and crazy things that people believe about them is one of the ideas that they are us from the future coming back in time, that time travel's been discovered, and that these spacecraft, these UFOs, are very complex time machines that are bringing people back, people that were human beings at a much later stage of our evolution, coming back to look at what life was like, or maybe even change the past. Again, we can't objectively say that this is that there's any credibility to this, because I mean, if we can't even deal with the simple ones, how are we going to deal with something like that? But what do you think of that theory, or have you come across anything in your research, Erica, about that?
Oh, Lord. I mean, there's so many rabbit holes to go down.
Yeah.
It's like, pick a day, pick a number. I mean, I only have time for so much, but I've heard that thought.
Yeah.
Yep, I've heard it.
I mean, you've heard it. That's all you can say, right? I mean, it kind of, for me, that kind of goes in the category of the idea that this is a holographic projection, like a matrix, sort of a virtual reality, complex computer. Some have theorized that we are actually much further in the future than we believe ourselves to be, and that we've been uploaded to this virtual reality that sort of simulates life at an earlier point in our existence to perhaps experience what it was like. I don't know. I don't know exactly what the reason is, but yeah.
I just I need the cliff notes for that one to try to
you
comprehend.
have to talk to Elon Musk, and he's the one that's talked a lot about holographic universe. But I mean,
I can't diss it then.
Yeah,
Elon Musk is talking about it.
I know, right? But
he's obviously a fan of the Matrix.
Yeah, well, he must have been. But see, the thing is that's really interesting is they talk about some of the limitations that seem to exist in the physical universe that they are using as an argument for explaining why we are actually in a virtual reality, very complex computer simulation or something. And one of them is certain limitations like the speed of light, time limit, putting you locking you into this vast, nearly infinite universe, bigger than anyone could possibly imagine, but we can't access virtually any of it because of the limitation of speed of light. You can't go faster than it. And even if you could go the speed of light, it'd still take you an ungodly amount of time to get anywhere. So you have to be able to go faster than light, which, as far as we know, at our current state of scientific development, is impossible. So, that's one
it
argument.
would make us time travelers too, wouldn't it?
Well, that's true, because then you have the relativity issue to deal with. Yes.
I mean, it's almost as though it's a creation.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this. I'm glad you picked up on it. Yeah, I wonder. It makes you wonder if that's not part of the design, that God created the creation, and as we experience it, to lock us into this little bubble, perhaps to protect us from whatever else might have been created that we don't know about. Which also brings us back to what we're talking about tonight. The idea of, are these extraterrestrials from other planets, or are they from other dimensions that are actually right here with us? Which seems to be, at least on some level, scientifically seems to make more sense to me.
Right. Yeah.
Because of that, because of the fact that how long would it take to get anywhere? And how many, even if there are a lot of planets in this universe that can support life, there's still so many more that cannot. So even if you could, travel to nearby stars, the chances of finding one that might support life is probably not very good. You'd probably have to go quite a ways away before you'd start running into some. So yeah, I mean, but then again, then it poses the problem of what is an interdimensional being. What does that mean to be interdimensional? Do we have a lot of scientific experience at the present time to be able to explain that? So it's not so sci-fi like.
Well, they're finding out more and more things all the time. I mean, look at what's going on up at CERN, and the wormhole theories, and the God particle. I mean, the more science tries to figure out the universe, the more that they're actually proving the existence of God or a divine creator.
What do you think of CERN, Erica? Do you think that relates to anything that's going on right now?
Who knows? I mean, who knows? I think that's an interesting and somewhat potentially disturbing.
Was it? Yeah. It was last year, 2 years ago, where they were going to basically try to manipulate some particle, and it could have tore a fabric in space and time, and
create an alternate universe.
Create a black hole.
Right, that's what it was. They're going to try to create a black hole, and we're all like, "Oh, that's a great idea."
Right.
We're going to wake up and there's nothing.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting because around that time, shortly after, our lives changed on this planet. I guess you could say it could be coincidence, but
oh Lord.
I mean, could this be an alternate universe? Could this be, some dark dystopian creation from the black hole of this experiment? Makes you wonder,
It does. Okay. Actually, now that you mention it, it kind of does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how many universes
need
are
another
there?
drink to wrap my head around that.
I mean, again, I don't dislike the idea of multiple universes.
I think it's very plausible.
Yeah, I mean, or even quantum, theory of, both. When you make a decision, both things happen. They just happen in different dimensions and all the rest of it. I think they're kind of interesting. Thoughts
on how to go about explaining it.
In terms of scientists, I mean, because I love science. I mean, I did all science A levels and then a theology degree. Go figure.
They're very much related, more than people realize.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I love science and scientific progress, and the sort of the contemporary atheist friends of mine who I talk to, always go back to this kind of scientific principle, and and I always push them, and what before that, and what before that, and what before that. And ultimately, we actually both come to the same conclusion. We just have different names for it. That there is an act of creation, a big bang, or whatever you want to, however people want to, what language they want to use to describe it now. All that seems to have developed in scientific knowledge about that is just the language they use to describe the fact that they don't have a bloody clue how on earth that can come about, that something can come from nothing. And that's what we say, well, that's God.
Yeah.
And they say, well, and I understand it, from a purely kind of theoretical scientific method perspective. They just say, well, I say I don't know. And I don't feel the need to insert God in that. So that's essentially, with thinking atheists today, that's the difference between believers and non-believers.
Well, see, I think part of the problem with I've never liked this crazy debate between creationism and evolution. It seems nonsensical to me, because everything that God does is process. Even from a theological vantage point, salvation isn't an instant thing. Salvation is a process. Correcting, from a theological vantage point, correcting original sin, correcting the fallen world is a process. Otherwise, it would have been, crucifixion, ascension, resurrection, and it's all done. But here we are 2,000 years later, still carrying on the process. So clearly God likes his processes, which stands to reason that if he creates something from nothing, we call that the Big Bang in science, and creation is unfolding in the form of evolution. I don't see a conflict.
Well, and it's also a necessary loving expression of God's belief in freedom.
Yes.
Because God gives us the time. God invents time. God gives us time in order to choose to love him freely.
Yes. So, Erica, now along those lines, one of the things that I tell people that, science is another big thing, trying to prove the existence of ghosts and demons, trying to get tangible scientific validation is the same thing with UFOs. It's the same problems that we run into. The paranormal is elusive. Incorporeal study is the scientific method's not that great with the incorporeal. So we run into these issues. But one of the things that I've always said, that if we're going to ever get to the scientific bottom, to get to a lowest common denominator of what's really going on here, to try to come up with some actual relevant scientific explanation for these things, it's going to happen with quantum mechanics. I think that's where this stuff ultimately resides, at least with ghosts and demons. What are your thoughts on that with UFOs and aliens? Do you think that quantum mechanics might bridge the gap between these incorporeal things that we are seeing in the paranormal, but we don't know what the hell to, explain, what this is, where we just kind of fall back on the observable universe, which kind of limits us to just what's happening with the corporeal world, the five senses?
Exactly. Sometimes you say things and it takes me 10 minutes to process them because they're so deep.
Well, we try to get we try to get a little deep here.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, it's just like
we won't let you drown. Don't worry.
No, I love it. I mean, like I love having conversations with you, because you're always saying something different, and you're making me question things and my belief systems and all sorts of things. But I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think, quantum mechanics could bridge that gap. But then, I mean, is this something, whatever it is, whatever they are, I mean, is it just something that is so elusive? It's one of those mysteries that we'll never be able to unravel.
Well,
it's always one step ahead.
It always makes you wonder, getting back to like the virtual universe, that this is a fabrication or some kind of simulation. One of the other theories behind this, which kind of relates back to some of this quantum mechanics, they've observed particles. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the names of these studies or what they refer to in physics specifically, but the principles are as follows. They've been able to find that there are particles, subatomic particles, that when they are being observed, they exist and they operate at a fundamental expected level. As soon as they're not being observed, then they do weird things and they sort of fall in and out of existence, which from one argument you could say it looks a hell of a lot like procedural generation in video games. Now, I don't know if you know a little bit about procedural generation, but
no.
Okay, I should. Let me explain it because it's fascinating. It's my favorite games are some of my favorite games that I've ever played is No Man's Sky, Elite Dangerous, and Minecraft. I enjoy those games. I play with my son. It's fun multiplayer. But what makes these games so much fun is that the universe that they exist within is literally infinite and completely random. In other words, these worlds are not designed by the people that created the program. The program designs the worlds and it generates them when the player is interacting with the world. As soon as the player leaves that environment, it's stored in potential, but is no longer displayed. Otherwise, you'd need like a massive supercomputer the size of a star to be able to run this program, because it literally contains, No Man's Sky contains like over 250 galaxies, all of which are larger than our actual Milky Way. Could you even fathom that you could create a game that has that kind of space within it? And yet it does, because it's all created procedurally. So the only part that your computer has to operate is the part that you see when you play the game. And as soon as you leave, then it puts it back into potential, and it shows you whatever you're looking at now. But what they're seeing with this observation in quantum mechanics is that our reality seems to work that way too, which means that, like the room, I've got a bathroom that's this way. I can't see it from here. Nobody's in there right now. And since nobody's using it, nobody can see it. In theory, according to this possible observation in quantum mechanics, the bathroom's not even there. It's only there when someone has to go to the bathroom.
Schrodinger's cat, isn't it?
Yes, it is. That's exactly that's what I was. Thank you. I was trying to remember that.
Does a tree fall in the forest?
Yes.
Does it make a noise?
And by this theory, it would say the answer to that is it does not make a sound. It doesn't even fall. It's only falling in potential, and then it only makes itself. We only become aware of it when we are there to actually experience the result of that potential. Now that
maybe that kind, because that's quite anthropocentric.
It is,
and I don't know. It just got me thinking. This is only a thought bubble of in Genesis, where God presents the animals to Adam and he gives them names.
Yes,
and it's almost as though they don't come into being until they're named.
Yes, yes.
So there's a sort of parallel there to that sort of anthropocentric way of looking at things.
It's kind of fascinating, and it makes you wonder, because there is some strong theory that sort of indicates that might be exactly what's going on. So who knows? Calling in from the 651 area code in Minnesota. Yes. Hello, you're on the air. Hello, 561. You're on the air.
Oh.
Hello.
Oh, shoot.
I'm doing well.
Hello.
Hey, go ahead, buddy.
Go ahead. We're all ears.
I think he's having
audio
issues.
Could you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear us?
Okay. Yeah, I don't think he can hear us.
I'm not sure. Caller?
Oh, wait. Is this me?
Yes, you're on the air.
That's you, but
are you listening to yourself? Because if you've got the show on, you're going to hear about 20.
I was just hearing Sister Marie as she was talking, and I was thinking that was the caller.
Yeah, no, that's
you're the caller.
You're the caller. You're the caller.
Oh my goodness! Oh, I'm on my cell phone, and I've never called into a radio show before, so I don't know how this works.
Okay.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm like, oh shoot. Okay,
you're fine. So, what's your question tonight?
I'm sorry.
No problem.
I was actually sitting here writing down questions because I'm actually really nervous.
Okay.
I'm like, they're actually going to answer here in a second.
Yeah,
we're very frightening people.
Don't be nervous.
Yeah, as you can tell, we're very intimidating and judgmental of everybody.
Well,
relax. You're amongst friends.
Well, you guys are really awesome. Actually, you guys are really freaking awesome, and I just want to. I really appreciate you guys, and this show is a gem. It's a gem.
Well, thank you. I love you guys. That. I love that kind of feedback. Thank you so much. Do you have a question for Erica tonight, or something about the subject tonight? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I commented earlier on the YouTube stuff, and I want to continue more with the whole Genesis 6 stuff and the Genesis 6 stuff.
Is this Rick?
Yeah, this is Rick.
Okay, hey Rick.
Hi.
Rick, welcome.
Thank you, man. This podcast is awesome. I really enjoyed this.
Awesome.
But like, I wanted to continue with the Genesis 6 stuff, and I wanted to learn more regarding obviously the whole Genesis 6 concept, and then the Anunnaki and the Book of Enoch and the pyramids, and also how the demiurge would come into play with this, and also the aeons. To me, the aeons sound kind of like angels, or sort of like personalities of God, you know?
Yeah. But the aeons out of the Gnostics belief.
Yeah, the Gnostics, or whatever you want to call them, you know.
You have the aeons, which represent sort of emanations of the divine in the Gnostic system, which I actually kind of like, and I would actually say it gets sometimes conventional Christians a little upset with me, but it's kind of.
But how does that play into the whole like UFO stuff, though? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I mean, the only thing I could say that would perhaps have a relationship there is that because we do seem to see that God emanates, we even see it with conventional theology, the Holy Spirit sort of a revealing of God, certainly that wasn't how the ancient Israelites understood God until it was revealed, this Trinitarian concept. So there seems to be like an emanation factor in at least as far as Revelation goes. The Gnostics take it further and say that no, God literally emanates, and that what we see as the Trinity is emanating from some unknowable higher reality of God that is even beyond those concepts. So if that's true, if God does emanate, if the entire creation is God emanating out divine reality, which
through his angels, and
through angels,
right?
Yeah, through angels or through creation itself, then perhaps some of this paranormal phenomena, like UFOs, is an extension of that. That's just not inside our range of understanding at the present time, because we're scientific people, and you need, for scientific method, you need objective observation.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
This is crazy because like, God has emanated in the form of his angels. You read the scriptures, and it's constantly stories of people being absolutely terrified, and then these entities say, "Do not be afraid," all the time.
Absolutely.
And then
well, if you look, the biblical description of angels is pretty horrifying.
Yeah,
Like you or me. Right.
But also, I think that again, I've mentioned it on the show before. Certainly in the Eastern Church, they talk about the divine light. That we can have experiences of the divine light, which emanates from the Father, actually. And so
yes.
So there's that, and I think that's a perfectly sensible, in the truest sense of the word, in as much as we can sense it, proposition. I think where I would be guarded is that it can tap into a kind of.
But what about these people? What about these people that have been actually like taken up by like these UFO things and shit? Like what about these people that have these legit experiences that have actually talk about being in this spaceship lab room type of situation?
Right. And there was a scientist,
and it's a bunch of accounts too.
Yeah, there was a scientist that recently. Sorry, that's okay. There's I can't remember his name. Oh, and I hate it too. He just passed away recently, and there was several subjects that claimed alien abduction, and they actually found little, like, transmitters or something under the skin in various parts.
Yeah, subcutaneous.
Yes.
Erica, do you remember his name?
Roger Lear?
I don't remember.
I don't remember the names. But I know what you're talking about. The transmitters and stuff.
Yeah, there's a documentary with him on there, and
I would just have to say I'd be very skeptical if that's the person we're talking about, because he was a podiatrist.
No, this is another.
Okay,
this is another guy. I think.
Yeah, that'd be.
He actually performed the surgeries and.
Yeah, so did Lear, and that would be interesting to find out who that is. Again, some of this stuff goes back to specific.
I think it was
groups.
Friedman. Something. Friedman,
Stan Friedman.
Yeah.
Was that
really?
He was a researcher for decades, but he didn't perform any surgery.
Okay, maybe he just covered the phenomenon.
Well, Erica, for the caller's benefit, he's asking about the classic alien abduction, the whole anal probes thing, I'm not
asking about no anal probes. Come on now.
I'm a cocktail now.
Yeah.
Anal probes.
Yeah, well, that's what they say, right?
Hey, well, no, but it's interesting, though. Yeah. Come on, it's interesting. Shoot.
I've lost it now.
What are your thoughts, Erica, on that?
I'm so disoriented now. I don't know.
That is some of the.
I should imagine that's the impact.
Sometimes I'm like a 12-year-old boy,
Experiments going on. Yeah.
It is interesting though to see, in all of this, that there are specific times where abductions were inserted into the narrative, where the implant was inserted into the narrative. And it goes back to a specific core group of people that are inserting that narrative. And a lot of the claims that are being made really can't be backed up with anything. And these people are making money, promoting that specific narrative. And so I guess because of everything that I've personally been through and the wonderful archive that I have here, I just inherited Anne Druffel's files, and she was one of the best researchers of all time. She 50 years, she was in every NICAP, she was in MUFON, she worked with UCLA, she was working with really important people that were studying abduction.
Who is it? What's your name?
Phenomenon. Her name was Anne Druffel, and she wrote several
I'm trying to write it down. What's your last name?
It's Druffel, Druffel. And I went to Pasadena. Her family graciously donated 50 years worth of her work. Woo. And it was 70 packed banker boxes. Full of correspondence between her and Donald Kehoe, her and John Mack. Her and all of the people that were really behind the scenes and studying abductions. And I think, at the end of the day, at the end of her life, her daughter asked her, Mom, what can you say about the subject now? And she said, show me a body, show me a craft. Right. And so that was like her. That was like, reading some of the correspondence and listening to her interviews and things. It was so interesting to see the process that she went through, this discovery process. And I think, for me, it's really, it's important because you're sifting through some of this garbage. And to me, the abduction, I have to wonder about the abduction stuff. I really do, even though I've had experiences.
See, I can't discount it, but yet, some of it seems freaking crazy,
But and it's so hard because I've interviewed people, and this is something that is just so important. This is something that really to them happened, but I don't know. It's a hard thing. It's a hard thing.
Well, it's that old maxim that
I know.
That all stories are true and some are factual. That's the old maxim. So they're telling a true story. It's a story that's true to them,
right?
And all stories are true, but they're not all happened.
Yeah,
right. It's like 80%.
What are you supposed to? What are you supposed to? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, what are you supposed to say?
I don't know. It's a hard thing because some of my dear, dear friends have had really traumatic experiences, life-changing experiences that they equate to being abducted. And so it's a hard thing. But I will say that, I think that this subject, that specifically needs to be investigated and looked into by people that are qualified professionals.
And in terms of what you say, you can accept somebody's story. without judgment, really. Right. You know, I mean, you don't need to. I mean, we live in an age where we love to have a conclusion. We want to have a kind of, a definite sort of ending to the story, but sometimes there isn't one. And so, I think that it was like with anybody talking about how they've experienced life and things that have happened to them. You can accept it without judgment, really.
Right. And that's a great thing. And I had a family that I've interviewed over the years that live in the Uinta Basin, close to the ranch. And I was fortunate enough to interview 3 generations and to have that on video. And I mean, it's some of this stuff I won't release out of respect, for them. But the grandmother who was in her 90s at that point when I interviewed her, I mean, she recalled many times in her life where she had missing time. There was one experience where missing
time.
Yeah,
missing time. Yeah, that's a big one.
And I mean, she said that she was, her and her husband were up camping. And they lost 3 or 4 days. And, one moment everything was fresh. The milk was fresh in the fridge. The next thing, everything had mold on it. She had some really disorienting things that happened. And one of the experiences that she did relate was the fact that she felt that she was abducted by a group of beings and that she was sick at the time. And she said the Godhead was there and that it helped heal
my
her.
Goodness.
I mean, it was just listening to her stories.
Wait, you said the Godhead. You said the Godhead?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's fascinating, because she was just a kind and lovely and beautiful person that I do not think at all was, making things up. That was an experience that happened to her, that she believed happened to her. And
something happened.
And so, it's one of those things. It blows my mind.
Wow.
And like I've said several times tonight, I change, I go to bed with one opinion and I wake up with another opinion.
That's the smartest way to be. Rick, thank you so much for calling into the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, Rick, see you in the chat.
Crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. The Godhead, the contacted her. Wow.
It was really interesting.
Yeah. Thank you, though. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll talk to you guys later.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care, man.
Thanks.
Father Chris, I see that we have another caller here.
We have your ex-friend, Riverboat Gambler. He's an ex-friend because you just said that you didn't mention his game in your favorite games. So,
oh yeah, well, I mean,
Trouble in Paradise.
So I
said some of my favorite games. If he wants to create a procedurally generated casino, I can guarantee you that will be my favorite game of all time. No, the Riverboat Gambler has a fantastic app on iPads, iPhones, Android, and he's actually working, I understand, to bring it to Steam. It's perhaps the best casino game that has ever been made because it has all the games. I was only
stirring so he'd give me some extra chips. That was all.
That's what you want to do? Okay, that's fine. It makes sense to me. But he had a question. I understand.
But he does ask a good question.
Okay, let's have it. And then there's another caller that's on the line. We're going to leave them on hold, so don't hang up. We'll get to you in just a moment.
So what does Bishop Bryan think about the plot of Stargate, wherein an alien populated a planet and established itself as the deity?
Well, I mean, I think, again, that falls into the same sort of realm of speculation of everything that we've talked about tonight. There's just, we can go on the ancient alien track, but how much...
like the Anunnaki story? I mean, they came here and made us...
Well, I mean, that's like Zechariah Stitchin's...
The two brothers.
Yeah. Erica, what are your thoughts on Zechariah Stitchin? I mean, do you think that there's any credibility to anything that those books that he's written? Or, I mean, feel free not to
You're just getting me in trouble tonight.
I know.
Aren't you?
Sure.
I know.
So that's a no then.
I mean, see, that's the thing. It's like...
Well, I mean... Yep. That's a no.
I think we're on the same page with that one.
enough.
See, the thing the problem I have is that there's just no concrete evidence that anything like that could have happened. Now, did it happen? I guess it's possible. I really liked Stargate, the movie. It wasn't really as much.
Too.
Yeah, it was a very well done movie. It was actually an idea that I had. And it shocked me because it's like, my God, did they like read my thoughts and make a movie? Because I used to think about, what about what if all these hieroglyphics that we'd see on Egyptian, tablets and on the walls of the pyramids, and what if these are not gods, but aliens coming back and being treated like gods because they're so far superior to human beings at that time. The technology makes them look divine. And it really leaves a lot to speculate about, but whether or not there's any evidence for this, I'm not so sure there is.
Star Trek: The Next Generation episode as well, wasn't it? With I think it was a female character that was pretending to be a god of the mythology of a planet.
Well, that's happened more than once. That even happened in the Star Trek V. They go to the center of the galaxy, and then there's like this deity that calls itself God, but it's just like this evil entity that's been imprisoned there.
I just watched that the other day. That's so funny.
Star Trek V?
No, well, Stargate. I've been watching way too much TV lately. I've just got to knock it off.
Called lockdown.
Yeah, it's called lockdown.
Well, Australia, we're more than most.
Oh my goodness! Yeah. I mean, so I don't know how I can really answer it better than that. I think it's a plausible theory, but it's no more plausible than anything else. In fact, I wouldn't even necessarily say plausible. I'd say possible.
I think it's related to the idol of the golden calf. It's kind of an inversion of that.
It is,
where we want to make ourselves the golden calf.
I think it is.
So I think it's as old as human sin.
And maybe that's the message. Maybe that's the message here. Maybe that's what aliens are really here to teach us, is that we manipulate the archetypes from within, project them outward, and these are the things that manifest out of our own consciousness. So perhaps all these things, aliens, UFOs, perhaps all they are egregores that we're projecting out, thought forms from our own psyche. I think there's enough evidence.
So y'all were saying, when I read Chariots of the Gods years ago, was that a waste of my time?
It might have been. It might have been.
Daniken, another one I should put in the trunk.
It might have been. Calling in from the.
I mean, my heart's being crushed here tonight.
Is it really? I'm sorry. We don't want to ruin anyone's dreams. We don't want to ruin anyone's dreams. Look at that wonderful
Lord,
kitty.
I know. God, he's going to jump on my back, or he's going to knock my computer over. So it's just, we've got to kind of. We're in a little defense here.
Calling in from the 201 area code in New Jersey. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, we're actually calling in from the Badlands of New Mexico. Bishop Bryan, Sister Mary Joan, it's Mike Parolo.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Mike, how are you, man?
Mike's old friend. Yeah, used to come to the mission church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But I got to tell you, we've been out here almost 4 years now. And before I moved out here to New Mexico, I wasn't totally sold on the whole extraterrestrial thing, but this place is whack, guys.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah?
What have you experienced out there?
The skies are so beautiful there.
Well, it's beautiful out here, but our backyard backs up to White Sands Missile Range in NASA. And so there are days and nights like at 3 a.m. that Karen and I are out in the back and we see the weirdest stuff just floating around the Oregon mountains. And I've talked to my friends now that I've made out here that are in the military, and they just kind of snicker and laugh. And they go, well, we can't tell you anything, but there's stuff going on. And there's like rumors of like holes in the mountains and tunnels underneath the bases. And it's like,
I've heard those stories. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, it's crazy. And Erica, I was going to say, the fascinating thing is I have friends who are actually from Roswell, and they're multi-generational families, and they were saying that in 1947, the government clamped down so hard on those ranchers and everybody in the town, and that they actually started this thing called Operation Mockingbird, which, I've kind of done a little research on, but none of this would surprise me anymore. But there's just so much intrigue out here and so much mystery, and people kind of go about it with
with a wink and a nod out here because it is truly the land of mañana. But I wonder if a lot of this stuff isn't just hiding in plain sight. It's kind of crazy.
It's interesting because, I think, like with Dulce and the underground base kind of thing, I had a fellow that just, he's been on my show, Ryan Gordon, and he was actually out there and took some amazing drone footage of what are supposed to be, the underground base and all of these things. And he did some really good investigating. And he said that basically the people in the town, some of the people in the town, used that story because they were trying to create revenue for tourism. And so I think,
either,
so I think some of those, it's so hard because I think you've got that element. I think you've got the government trying to cover up testing. And so they're inserting these myths into the narrative and things. And that happens, a lot at Dugway, because we're testing a lot of stuff out there and people have reported some crazy stuff. So who knows what it is, but I bet that's a fascinating experience for you guys.
Well, it is, and I used to work at West Point, and I was a DoD contractor, so I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the aircraft. And at nights, and it's always at 2 and 3 in the morning, we see these multiple light things just hovering and floating around, and around NASA and stuff. It's pretty whack.
So
I know we have some crazy technology, but who knows?
So describe that a little bit more, because I would love to know.
Actually, one of them looked like kind of like they were Tic Tacs, and what Karen saw a Tic Tac as well. Yeah, and it was a Tic Tac with rotating lights, and the bottom, and it wasn't just like a port and starboard like red and green thing. It was like all around and a big white light at the bottom. I know it sounds insane, but
not to us.
Not to us.
There isn't like a week that goes by we don't look toward the Oregon Mountains and the missile base, and we just honestly see the weirdest shit.
Are you guys photographing any of it?
Karen's tried, but it's hard. It's hard with the iPhones and stuff. It doesn't, especially that late at night. It's really hard to get some decent photos. She tried, but
blurry,
the only thing that came up the one time was like just a blur.
Yeah.
You realize how much better the human eye is than most cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's probably a good thing, if you are witnessing something that the people wouldn't want you to know about, it's probably a good thing you can't take pictures of it. I don't know.
I don't know, right? Because last week we had 5 Blackhawks fly over at about 2 in the morning and head toward NASA. So who knows what's going on out here? And I don't necessarily want to know, right? But it's just the aerial phenomenon in the state is pretty crazy.
I've heard stories. That sounds cool. You might expect it. Maybe I'll just pull up there and pay you guys a visit and hang out with you for the weekend.
We're here.
The stories go back way before military was there. You talk about some of the stories the natives have about star people and stuff out that way in the Southwest. Just a fascinating
you're right,
phenomenon.
because I know they found petroglyphs and stuff.
Right.
With some pretty amazing things up in the northern part of the state. So it's like, 4,000 years ago, what were they seeing?
True.
And what were they understanding too? What would have been their understanding of what they were seeing, assuming these things were going on as far back as then,
It's no different than the book of Revelations, right, guys? In some sense, we don't really know what John was seeing.
Mm-mm.
No, even that is largely speculative. There's some historical determinations that, different denominations have subscribed to, but to ever really say...
There's going to be a great show on that coming up, though, isn't there?
There is. We're going to be talking about eschatology and the book of Revelation and what the end times means. That's coming up in a few weeks. So you definitely
going back to New Mexico, as you know, I'm a big fan of Thomas Sowell, and he took in his book where he's trying to say that not all difference is discrimination. He talks about the fact that 90% of the world's tornadoes occur in sort of 3 states of the USA.
Right.
that's kind of unfair, but it's just the way it is. And so it was not fair or unfair. It's just the way it is. Unfortunate for those that live there. But who knows? I mean, because there's so much activity centered on New Mexico, Nevada, that sort of area, there could be all sorts of reasons that, naturally occurring reasons as to why certain light phenomena are experienced there. So I'm just kind of, I was just throwing that out there as a sort of idea as to why, because people ask the question, why there, and is it just because Americans are a certain way?
Well, there's something definitely about that region, because, you got the Area 51 in Nevada, and a lot of UFO sightings take place in Nevada. I used to live in Las Vegas, so, I mean, I can testify to the weird things that you see. Of course, there is, again, the bases and everything else. Utah, Skinwalker Ranch, you got all of the crazy stuff that happens out there that we've already kind of touched on tonight. But, then you have Arizona, you have Sedona with the vortex. And I've been to them. I can tell you, like, I was one of the biggest skeptics about the Sedona vortices. And I took a trip to venture to all of them, or at least as many of the ones that I could fit into this trip. I was only there for about 3 days or 4 days, but I went to quite a few. There's no question about it. It's a dizzying experience. It made my wife sick. She really became emotional and kind of collapsed and just fell to her feet and fell to the ground, and was hysterical, could not get up, and was out of nowhere. I mean, it was like nothing had happened. We hadn't even reached the top where you can look down into one of them. But I remember I made it to the top, and the energy was just, you just felt like you were in a cyclone. A swirling energy, and you look in, and it was so disorienting. Like, I mean, if you were on a cliff, you could easily just fall in, because it had sort of an intoxication sensation. It was almost like you were just like unstable. And everyone experiences it differently. Like, there are other people that were up there meditating. I can't even imagine what kinds of experiences you'd have if you try to meditate there. But I mean, here's another in close proximity to that part of the United States where there's a lot of strange energetic activity that the indigenous people knew about. That's part of the reason why they ventured out that way. Clearly, these were places of power that they understood, at least on some spiritual level. Maybe that's our problem. Maybe part of the reason that we're not understanding this is because we're taking too much of a scientific vantage point. Maybe we need to step back and, as Erica kind of alluded to in the beginning, get more intuitive, because maybe there's something less concrete at the heart of all of this. And I don't know. I don't.
There are many places where the Native American tribes out there, it was off limits to everybody in the tribe, and no one would go there because it was tainted land, evil land. I think the Desolation Mountains is one example. I think even Skinwalker Ranch, that area.
Yeah. Well, they say.
Yeah, they say.
But
you have thousands of years of the natives living there, and it was still an area that was off limits because they knew something was going on.
And I think the same thing is true with
advanced technology.
I think the same thing's true with Salt Lake City. I think it's cursed ground, honestly, because I think that it was never meant to be built or developed. I think it tainted the land, or it was cursed in such a way that if it were to ever be defiled in that way, that this would be the result. I've never felt such negative energy in such a beautiful place as being out there in that Salt Lake area. It was just
so amazing.
It is.
I mean, I remember the first time you guys told me that.
Yeah, I couldn't.
We landed in Salt Lake City, got in a rental. We're on the way to the location to film for Ghost Adventures, the Ogden Possession episode. And I remember looking at the bishop and going, something is telling me, be careful where you tread.
Yeah.
It was the mountain speaking to me.
It's sacred
Absolutely
ground.
Stunningly beautiful, but I had this feeling of dread. And I'm a mountain girl. I love the mountains.
It's sacred ground. There's no question about it. But we are at the end of the show. Erica, thank you so much. It goes so fast, even though it's 3 hours.
Well, and you guys are coming on my show soon.
I can't wait.
That'd be great.
I can't wait.
I love it. I just enjoy talking to you guys so much. And thank you for a wonderful evening.
Well, thank you so much for being with us and being so generous with your time to spend 3 segments with us, answering all our audience questions and just giving us such wonderful insights. If anybody would like to reach out to you to maybe talk further about some of the things that were discussed tonight, how's the best way to reach you?
I mean, Twitter, even though I try not to, I don't know, tweet. I need to really not
Toxic
tweet.
place.
I mean, honestly, I think social media is just can be so toxic.
I swore at someone for the first time 2 weeks ago on Twitter. I just got to the point I thought, this is just lunacy.
Oh, it's insane.
It's
insane.
But anyway, it was the first time because they said, are you sure you want to send this?
Yeah, I know.
That's
how they ban you, That's how they ban you. Once you have too many of those, they just delete your account like they did mine.
Since you got deleted, I've had to log in 3 times.
Oh, you see, I think they're connected. Anybody connected to me. Anyone connected to me.
It's crazy. But Twitter, Erica Lukes, UAP. I've been kind of I've not been as good at answering stuff, but I'm getting back into that now. And so, find me on Facebook or ericalukes.com or UFOclassified.com or I don't know, just one of those places.
Google her.
She's out there. Thank you so much, Erica. Father you. Chris, Sister Mary Joan, thank you. We will be back next week with another episode of Vestiges After Dark. I think we'll be talking about dark archetypes and movie making. So you don't want to miss it. It's going to be a good show. We'll catch you on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, live once again, taking your questions, 3 hours. I think this is a good format. Until then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless. Goodbye, everyone.